The ArmA 3 player logged onto the internet one day with little to no but much to say.
The AI are terrible, he said. They can't use planes.
No, said Drongo. And lo, the player was bombed.
The AI are awful,
said the player.
They can't suppress my position.
No, said Nkenny. And lo, the player was suppressed. Jesus Christ, that's a lot of suppression.
The AI are hopeless,
said the player.
They can't even lay mines.
To which I say, watch your step. Now your AI can too break the laws of war. And yes, they will avoid their own mines. Welcome to Dynamic AI Minefields, a mod I've been working on for an upcoming series that I'm hopefully soon to debut, but I had to finish this first. It was my first real foray into making proper AI stuff. It's not particularly amazing, but it's definitely better than anything I've ever made. I'm definitely no AI genius, but I did do at least what I set out to achieve, which was to make the AI actually lay minefields. Now, if you don't know an ArmA, the AI is never really, as far as I know, there could be some mod that has done it, but as far as I've seen, never has really been able to lay a minefield dynamically on their own, you know, without players telling them to do it. VCOM allowed AI to lay mines, but their system was, to put it very lightly, god-awful. They would just kind of drop mines all over the place, like outside the door of their building, and just, you know, while they were walking around, they just randomly place mines. It wasn't good. Contrary to popular belief, minefields are actually far more like a castle wall than just like a random trap that you just put in the trees. You're like, alright, that's fine. You're meant to actually defend a minefield. They're meant to constrict where enemies can move to so that you can funnel them into where you want to actually shoot the enemies rather than them having freedom of movement. Now, obviously, I was never going to be able to achieve the level of, you know, player placing minefields where players can accurately know, oh, I think they'll come through this valley, etc., but I've done my best with the AI that I have. This mod's got a good bit of complexity and a lot more ambition in it, so if you do have any issues with it once it actually gets some battle testing and operations, you can send those to the Steam page, or the Discord, or the GitHub. All those three locations I check. We have this demo mission here, which we'll go through in a moment, but I'm going to start by just doing a super basic explanation of the mod for anyone who doesn't want to know the technical stuff and just wants to know, what does this mod do? The AI will look at all the friendly forces in an area and group them into a task force. It will then look at all the enemy forces that it knows are in an area and try and group them into an enemy task force. Once it has gathered this knowledge, it'll do its best to put minefields in between these task forces. Between a friendly task force and an enemy one, it will try and put a defensive minefield. In between enemy task forces, it'll try and put an interdicting minefield, and any enemy groups it sees moving long distances, it'll put an intercept objective following their trail. The idea here is if you keep taking the same path over and over again, you may eventually find a mine on it. These aren't actually laid minefields yet, they're just objectives that the system has generated and will now hand over to the second part of the system where the AI will go and try and lay the mines. At its core, it's pretty simple. Look at where the enemies are, look at where the friendlies are, put minefields in between them, then tell the AI to go put minefields on them. Cool? Great. Let's get into the technical side of things. This demo mission is going to be on the workshop as well, and it's a good thing to dig around and to kind of learn how the mod will work. I'll also be making one for Persist as well. Over here we have the damn general settings. This is the most basic core module of the mod and is what activates the mod. To start with, the side of the mine layers obviously just depends on who's laying the mines. Op4, Independent, and Blue4 can all independently lay their own mines in the same mission. This is how often the system will scan to see if there's any update to the enemy positions and therefore task forces, and same for intercepting, and for the mine objectives if there's any new objectives to create. They're set to 30 seconds and 15 seconds for the demonstration, but I recommend setting them to 900 and 600 seconds, respectively. You don't want the system spamming out minefields, and you also want to give the mission enough time to actually change before you scan it again. This is particularly important for intercepting, as if a group doesn't actually have enough time to move in that 30 seconds, they won't be considered as interceptable. The next up, we have groups to make task force and soldiers nearby to make the group. Soldiers nearby is pretty simple. How many group members have to be in an area for that to be considered the group being there? So a single member of a group somehow, being 500 meters away from the rest of the group doesn't count as the entire group being there. And groups to make task force explains itself. How many groups have to be in an area for that to be considered a task force. In this case, 4 I consider as a decent minimum. Any less and any small grouping of soldiers will be considered a task force worthy of, having a minefield laid to defend it, even if it's just, 2 groups at a checkpoint. Next is forgetting group timer. So the AI actually has a memory, which basically means that if they spot a group, to give a little example, let's say that they're watching this hill and they see one group pass by this hill and they know they've seen the group. So they, yep, there's a group there. We saw them there last time. And then a group passes by again, and then another group passes by again, and then another group passes by again. That's now 4 groups. They will then consider that area an enemy task force because they have seen enough enemy movement at that location. They won't double count groups though. They'll always only count groups once. And if a group they remember seeing shows up in a different location, they'll stop counting the group at the old location. Scan of Empty is a cost-saving thing, essentially, that if the system detects that there is no more groups on the side able to lay mines, as in they've either run out of mines or they've all been killed, then it will simply stop running, because Dam doesn't need to run anymore. However, if your mission wanted to include mine layers spawning in later, or reinforcements, or, randomly spawning mine layers, then this system would need to be ticked on, which means that the scanning system will continue to run even when those mine layers are all gone. Task Force for Intercept objectives was a design choice that I couldn't really decide either way on. Basically, if you tick this on, then the only time an Intercept objective will be generated is if it's a group leaving a task force. What that means is, at Stavros we have a friendly task force full of Blue 4, and if someone traveled all the way up over to Gravia, they could then have an intercept generated along that route. However, if there was just a single group in Kavala and they traveled all the way up to Kore, there would be no intercept generated. The idea here is it's trying to intercept people leaving major concentrations of enemy positions and laying mines along those routes, rather than just laying mines along any group they see. Mine chance is the chance that a mine-laying group will actually get the orders to go lay a minefield in one of the known objectives during the mine objective update cycle. This is purely a randomization thing to make sure the AI don't always lay all of their mines immediately in the first 10 minutes of a game, but also to mean that the players can't always know for certain whether or not they will have laid mines yet. If you set this to 1, that is 100%, which means a 100% chance that an AI with a mine-laying group will get an objective if there is an objective available. The next 3 are weighted options. What this means is it influences how likely a group is to do one of these objectives. If there was a defense objective, an intercept objective, and an interdict objective available, the group is far more likely to pick the defense objective, and then next is more likely to pick the intercept objective, and is least likely to pick the interdict objective. These are all completely customizable, and at 0 they will never pick an objective, while at 1 they will almost certainly always pick an objective unless something else is equally as high. Road preference chance is the chance that the AI will prefer to place their mines on a road. Let's imagine that this yellow circle is our minefield objective. In this case, it's an 0.8, so an 80% chance for this check to pass. If it didn't pass, the group is simply going to pick a safe location, as in an area where they think they can lay mines, so not water, not a cliff, etc., and start laying mines. But if it does pass, they're going to pick the nearest section of road and start the minefield there. It won't all stay on the road, but the minefield will start on the road. If this group knows that enemy vehicles have been spotted in the targeted task force, then that means they'll also lay an AT mine as the first mine they lay on the road. The next is distance limit, which is simply how far a mine group will travel to reach an objective. If the objective chosen for them is further away, they simply won't accept it. This field just exists in case you're using mods and you need to tell them that a specific mine is an anti-tank mine. Vanilla and Sog Prairie Fire already come pre-configured. Minimum mine count is how many mines a group must still have to be considered a mine-laying group. Auto-detect mine groups will basically detect anyone above the minimum mine count and add them to the mine-laying group list for their side. Well, that was complex, but we're going to go through the other modules really quick, because the rest of them are quite simple. First of all, over here is an exclusion zone. We choose a side that doesn't want to lay mines here. We tell it how big the circle should be in both X and Y, and debug as if it's visible or not. An exclusion zone means the AI will not generate the center of the minefield in that zone. They'll also attempt to not lay mines in the area, though that's far less reliable, so always make sure to try and leave a little bit of overhang if you don't want AI laying mines directly outside of your exclusion area. So you can use this in order to make sure the AI don't accidentally mine their own highway or mine their own FOB, and so on and so forth. The next 2 modules are just used for assigning groups. This one is add mine layer group. Simply sync a group to this and they will become a mine laying group for their side. If they don't have enough mines though, they'll just be removed in the next cycle. This module restricts groups' objectives. This module is synced to the group leader here, and in this case it restricts them to only doing interdict and intercept objectives, no defense objectives. So those are all the modules. Onto the mission itself before we actually boot it up. There's simply a friendly task force here, an enemy one here, which will soon be discovered by some friendly forces, an enemy one here, which will soon be discovered by some friendly forces, and also some independent ones. We'll get to those guys in a moment. And then over here, we have a simple little just testing arena to try and generate intercept objectives. This isn't 100% reliable, mainly because of how short the cycle timer is for this demo mission. Intercept groups need to move a certain distance to be considered interceptable, and obviously if the timer is resetting every 15 seconds, it's unlikely they're actually moving that far. Finally, over here, we have something that will only actually function with Ace. This mod is compatible with both Lambs and Ace, and when I say compatible with Lambs, I mean it turns Lambs off on the mine laying groups, because they were really unreliable, rather, without that. As for Ace, something quite interesting in ArmA 3 Vanilla and Ace is that IEDs, yes, these things, don't actually come in pressure plate form, as far as I'm aware, or if, at very least that's something that Ace has done. These IED dug-in are remote only, so you have to set them off manually, which this system does not do. It does not handle explosives. It handles mines, which are pressure plate, proximity set-off explosives. The issue is that Ace combines these two as the same item, so I've included a special exception that will detect if you're playing Ace and such as these guys here are carrying IEDs on you. Here we go. So as we can see, these guys have got a large IED, and a couple of small ones. If you do have Ace on, these IEDs will count as mines and will be placed by these groups. Large IEDs will also be counted as anti-tank mines. This group isn't actually told to be a mine-laying group. Instead, I've got over here scan if empty and auto-detect mine groups. So this independent side, if you're running Ace, will detect that this group has now considered fair mines, and will then send them off to build a minefield out of IEDs. If you're not running Ace, it won't actually add that group to the mine list. Welcome to RCO Dam. So over here, we have the Exclusion Zone. Since it's debug, you can clearly see it's marked on the map, but if it was not debug mode, then it would just be invisible. Here we can see the AI have made their first friendly task forces. Now, they'll always be blue because it's always just the AI thinking that they are friendly and enemy will always be red. Oh, here we go. The first enemy task force has been discovered up here. And if we jump into Zeus... Oh, and there we go. I think you may have actually just seen that. That was the detector line, which I'll show more of in a moment, but here we go. These guys are engaging and they've discovered enough information about the enemy forces to say that there is a task force there. That line that goes between them is basically checking if there is any task forces between them or, interruptions to the objective. So for this friendly task force, if there was another friendly task force here, they wouldn't lay a minefield between them. Oh, and there we go. We've now just seen 2 more objectives. Once again, if there was a friendly task force here, there would once again not be this minefield lay, because you don't want to lay mines between your own forces. You want to lay them between yourself and the enemy. This interdict objective is put between enemy task forces, where obviously, once again, there are not any interceding problems like more task forces. Here we have a group laying their first minefield. As you can see, they've clearly preferred to place it on the road, and these little floating debug markers just show you where they're intending to place all of their mines. Now let's talk about the minefields themselves. Here we've got a nice little tripwire flare. Over here we have, oh, that's an Aper's mine. They're laying random mines, which is how the system works. What that means is that every minefield laid will most likely be a mixed minefield, which implies anti-tank mines and anti-personnel mines. I am considering adding the ability to just place anti-tank minefields and just place anti-personnel minefields. The biggest issue I face there is the AI knowing whether they should lay one or the other, which is quite difficult. The AI will then extract the nearest friendly task force once they've completed their job. I did mention the AI will know if there's enemy vehicles, and what I mean by that is that if there is an enemy vehicle spotted in the task force they're targeting or the group they're intercepting, they won't send a mine group unless they have an AT mine. In this method, you can personally control whether or not a group will lay an AT minefield by only giving them AT mines. Those units will then only be sent to jobs where they have to lay anti-tank mines, and groups without anti-tank mines will only be sent to jobs where they only require anti-personnel mines. That's the best I could do with the system I have. I maybe want to make a different one, kind of an option to make sure they only go and will lay certain mines in an area, as I do have a list to separate AT mines from normal mines, but it again comes down to how do I actually detect whether or not an AI thinks that an AT minefield is appropriate or an AP minefield is appropriate. Here we can see one that wasn't chosen to be on the road and one that was chosen to be on the road. There we go. That was actually quite convenient of you. Thank you, AI. Additionally, once the group is done with the objective, you'll see that the defense objective choice has disappeared, but the exclusion zone remains. This basically ensures the AI won't slowly close themselves in with infinite minefields and nowhere to go. I've also added an automatic system to persist that will automatically persist these minefields. What that means is that while persist actually already persisted, God, I've said that word too many times, the mines themselves, they will now also persist the minefield exclusion zone, meaning that if you're using both dynamic AI minefields and persist, the AI will remember where they've laid mines and not repeatedly lay mines in the same position. Even more importantly, if all of those mines are diffused or eliminated, there's no more mines in the area, the AI will remove the exclusion zone and then feel free to plant more mines. Here's an interdict objective with these guys laying tripwire mines along the road. Why they would really do this, I wouldn't know, but again, it works for all mines, including pungies, claymores, tripwires, everything. The tripwires, pungies, claymores, all those sort of weapons will face the direction of the enemy. One important note when I say claymores, by the way, the only ones that it currently works with are the SOG Prairie Fire proximity claymores, as claymores actually are detonated by remote control, as in, a soldier holding the controller will set off the explosive. But SOG Prairie Fire has proximity-based ones, and those will work with this system facing the direction of the enemy. Quite scary to be able to see all of the triangles and not actually be able to see a thing. Shouldn't have done that. Now, we know there's a minefield here, and you may be wondering, surely, Rimmy, surely giving the AI the ability to place mines is a terrible idea, because they're all just going to kill themselves. Not only are you wrong, but it's not even something that I did. I'm not even allowed to brag about this. This is just vanilla. AI will avoid known mines. However, let me explain a little story from development. So here we go. You can see these AI know the mines are here, so they're quite intelligently going to avoid all of them. Even this guy coming back is going to avoid the mines. I swear to God, if you step on them and ruin my demonstration, I will be the one to kill you. Good. So these guys have avoided the mines. They'll even weave through fields if required. They'll, dive and dodge. They just don't want to stand on the mines. They do a pretty damn good job. It takes a lot to force an AI to stand on a mine, generally ordering them directly onto it. This guy's having a bit of a hard time, though, because he knows there's quite a few mines here. Oh, there we go. You see he's dodging that one and that one. Oh, and he comes back. I think he's just dodged one over there. And there we go. He's back with his squad. Look at this lad. Oh, now he's got to go back the other way. This poor man. So that story I was telling you about, I managed to get this system working so perfectly that the AI could lay minefields and never step on them once, and then easily leave the minefield they had just lain. That was incredible to watch. I got, 15 minefields in a row laid without a single casualty. And then I put it on the server and they decided to all speedrun Purple Hearts. It seems on servers that the propagation of the knowledge of a mine is really delayed. It's either something not important or it just takes a while. In my general testing, wasn't exactly that scientific. It generally took about 30 to 60 seconds for an AI to go, oh wait, there is actually a mine here, whereas they did it instantaneously in single player. So in order to avoid mass fatality, when the field is actually being laid by the mine laying group, all of the mines are disabled simulation. That means the mines won't actually hurt you, you can just run on top of them. But as soon as the group is done, there is about a minute timer until the mines all activate. This will also happen if the group dies, or if they run out of mines, or if, the system just breaks, whatever, and the stuck checker activates. But now, yep. There we go, they're active. And if we went to find a group that's currently laying mines, here we go, here's a mine this guy has just laid. If I walk over and stand on it, you'll find out it doesn't explode. So for whatever reason you do show up and a mine doesn't start exploding, the answer isn't poke it, the answer is run, because you have just lucked out and you have about 30 seconds until that mine activates and will attempt to kill you. I wish I could have kept the very smooth and sleek system from single player, but it was simply not playable in multiplayer. The AI would just commit mass Sudoku every time they decided to lay some mines. And there you go, an intercept objective was finally generated by this car just going in circles. I think that's covered pretty much everything I need to say about the mod. If there's more, I will probably record myself adding it on. Until then, thank you all for watching. I hope you have a fun time with this mod. I still need to do a few tweaks from this session, but hopefully it'll be releasing tomorrow morning. So if you see me then, g'day everyone. I've been sleeplessly working on editing this video, probably. For now, farewell, and keep an eye out for the upcoming series, because I think people are going to really enjoy it.